Now do you all see why I'm not doing a play-by-play kind of summary? Aside from just ruining the show for anyone who hasn't seen it, this video would probably be 4 hours long if I did, and ain't nobody watching that, so we're back to regularly scheduled programming from here on out. Episode 2, Transformation. Yusuke and Sakurako are eating at a cafe discussing Yusuke's transformation when Ichijo stops by and asks Yusuke to come outside to talk to him. Ichijo barely has the time to get out his question of if Yusuke was the one to fight the spider monster when he interrupts him and says, "Yeah, I fought the spider-looking guy." When Ichijo asks him why he did so, Yusuke says that it felt right for him to fight. Clearly not seeing this as a sufficient reason, Ichijo tells Yusuke to back off for now. Yusuke continues to pester him for information about whether or not the monster is still alive, and in his attempt to dodge the question, Ichijo inadvertently confirms that it is. Ichijo is then called to another homicide scene nearby, to which Yusuke follows close behind. While Ichijo examines the body, Yusuke overhears some pedestrians express concern for the priest of the church where the body was found. Yusuke, deciding to check for himself, sneaks inside via an open window, of course. He does find the priest, but he seems to be acting a little odd, avoiding the sunlight and almost charging at Yusuke when he sees him. Deciding that knowing that the odd priest is still alive is good enough, Yusuke leaves without investigating further. Late that night, Ichijo is alerted to a bat monster that's currently engaged with a police squad and goes to assist, with Yusuke following him once again. Yusuke attempts to transform and fight, but is shoved back by Ichijo, telling him to just leave it to them, not complying. Yusuke brushes past Ichijo and begins to fight, getting his ass completely handed to him and landing them both in the hospital. At the hospital, Yusuke attempts to apologize for screwing up the fight, but Ichijo snaps at him, stating that while he may have the ability and strength to fight, he has no obligation to do so, and that if he's not going to take this seriously, he shouldn't get involved. Yusuke then goes to the funeral for the head of the excavation team from the ruins. We see Sakurako offering her respects when a young girl, likely the man's daughter, begins sobbing and runs out of the house. Yusuke, who's been outside the whole time, sees her begin to break down as she leans against a wall. Yusuke watches the scene for a few moments and punches a wall in frustration. Meanwhile, a witness leads Ichijo back to the church from earlier, where he finds the priest that Yusuke found is actually the human disguise for the bat monster. The monster attacks him, throwing him around and knocking over a candle that lights both Ichijo and the church on fire. Ichijo is about to be killed when Yusuke drives through the doors and runs over the monster. Ichijo accuses him of learning nothing from before, but Yusuke stops him and says that these monsters have taken too much already and that he doesn't want to see anyone else cry. So he's going to take this seriously and fight. He asks Ichijo to watch his transformation as the belt appears again and Yusuke strikes his iconic pose for the first time. Yusuke fights again, now having a new red-colored armor to replace the white one. This form clearly has more power than the last, as Yusuke is able to keep up with the bat monster much more easily than before. The spider monster jumps in and attempts to even out the fight, but the morning sun scares the bat away, leaving the spider alone. Yusuke defeats the spider monster, causing it to explode. The final scene of the episode shows Yusuke, with Ichijo leading on him as the two watch the sunrise. Episode 3, Tokyo. Ichijo wakes in a hospital to a message from Yusuke stating that he's going to take things seriously and really get to work as soon as he gets back from a visit to Tokyo. Yusuke and Sakurako arrive in Tokyo, and the two split up as Yusuke decides to visit a preschool where his sister Minori works at. Meanwhile, Ichijo is receiving the results from a blood test on the spider monster that seems to imply these monsters are in some way human. The police have a meeting to discuss the monsters and reveal that there has been sightings of a total of 7. However, we see that they count both of Yusuke's forms as not only among the monster's ranks, but as two separate entities. Ichijo protests that number 2 and number 4, as they call him, shouldn't be considered a target as they saved his life, but he stumbles and backs down when solid proof of his claims is requested. Yusuke climbs into a window again. Ichijo goes out to find the bat monster to try and prevent Yusuke from getting involved and thus getting shot. He runs into a woman with a rose tattoo on her face who speaks in a strange language. Ichijo intuits that this is likely another monster and stops her for questioning, to which she pushes past him and runs away, stopping him from following with a cloud of rose petals. But apparently this did jack shit, as Ichijo follows her anyway. He finds her talking to the human form of the bat monster, and the two become aware of his presence when his fucking phone starts ringing. The bat attacks him again, but is called off by the rose woman, and the two leave. Meanwhile, Yusuke is walking around Tokyo when he spots a man being attacked by a cheetah-like monster. Yusuke attempts to fight it, but both combatants stop as the police arrive and begin pointing guns at them as the episode ends. Episode 4, Sprint. The fight between Yusuke and the monster ends as both of them scatter as the police start opening fire. The next morning, Ichijo is called to Tokyo as well, as the police are starting to form a special task force to deal with the threat. Once there, he's almost immediately alerted to another attack by the cheetah monster, and he calls Sakurako in hopes of getting to Yusuke to call him off, but he's already gone. Yusuke sees a motorcycle cop chasing the monster crash and goes over to check on the man. After confirming he's okay, he steals the bike and rides off after the monster. He chases it for a while but isn't able to catch up to it at all, stalling on a set of stairs where Ichijo catches up to him. Ichijo takes Yusuke to police HQ to keep him from getting arrested, where he hears over the radio that the monster has engaged a police squad and that they're getting slaughtered. Finally coming to terms with the fact that the police really can't handle the situation, Ichijo gives Yusuke a state-of-the-art police bike called the Tri-Chaser 2000. Yusuke transforms and rides off. He arrives on the scene in time to save at least one officer, another detective named Sugita. Yusuke is now easily able to keep up with the cheetah using the tri-chaser, and he corners the monster inside of a building. Also, small tangent, but we see less and less motorcycle fights over the series as it goes on. It was said by a Toei official that this is because getting onto and fighting on a motorcycle just isn't cool anymore, which I beg to fucking differ. More officers arrive on the scene and almost shoot at Yusuke again, but Ichijo and Sugita call them off and allow Yusuke to defeat the monster. Yusuke gives Ichijo a thumbs up, to which he turns around before returning the gesture as he walks away. Episode 5, Distance. Ichijo drags Yusuke to the hospital to get a checkup by a friend of his named Tsubaki. Tsubaki says that the belt inside of Yusuke has its own kind of nervous system that sends out the signal for his body to transform. He also theorizes that should the nerves reach his brain, Yusuke might undergo a personality change as well as a physical one. Ichijo is later questioned as to why he gave the tri-chaser to Yusuke, but he simply says that the chief should trust him and that he'll take responsibility if Yusuke turns out to be an enemy of humanity. To which the chief agrees and rescinds the order to shoot on sight. Later, Yusuke is called to fight a grasshopper monster, but it has serious hops, so Yusuke is unable to fight it effectively and subsequently gets pushed down the stairs. Yusuke awkwardly climbs up, but the stairs only get pushed down again, and through the power of not wanting to be pushed down the stairs a third time, Yusuke unlocks a new blue form for Kuuga, which it seems to increase his jumping ability, but subsequently gives him much weaker punches, so he cannot resist when he is pushed down the stairs once again. Episode 6, Azure Dragon. Ichijo arrives on scene and attempts to shoot the monster, but Yusuke's in the damn way, so the monster flees at the sight of smoke wafting closer from a nearby smokestack for some fucking reason. Yusuke is taken to the hospital, but he heals incredibly quickly, being back on his feet before the day's even over, or at least it seems that way. Ichijo is given a new rifle, which I'm sure is bound to help, and then Yusuke gets called to another fight. He goes directly into his blue form against his will, but once again gets his ass kicked for a while until Sakurako shows up. She tells him that she translated a passage that says the warrior with a heart like water strikes his foes with a long weapon. Somehow understanding what the hell she's talking about, Yusuke breaks off a section of the railing and transforms it into a quarterstaff. Now with a proper weapon, Yusuke's easily able to defeat the monster. Episode 7, Grief. And now we get on to the other thing I'll be counting, which is all the stuff Yusuke puts the Kuuga symbol on. Trust me, there's a few. We get properly introduced to the daughter of the excavation team head, Mika Natsume, who I will likely bring up for this episode and never again, despite the fact that she's a recurring character. She brought in an artifact from the ruins to the police in hopes that it might help catch the monster that killed her father. Ichijo, not knowing anything about what the hell this thing is, tells them to visit Sakurako that she might be able to do something with it. And thank God for Sakurako, as she finally frees me from having to say monster so many times, as she finally translates the name of both the tribe that created Kuuga, known as the Rinto or Linto, I cannot tell with their accents, and the tribe that they fought against and has been recently revived, known as the Grongi. And I don't know if this is intentional, but it is interesting. Some of you may be, quote, cultured enough to know that Guro is a Japanese word for gore. So if you translated the first part of Grongi, which is G-U-R-O-N-G-I, and left the second part of it, it would be Gorgi, which is similar to the English word gory, which is definitely a way to describe their actions. Anyway, back on topic. Mika and her mother pay a visit to Sakurako and show her the artifact, which she passes off the topic to another researcher, an American named Jean, who I will also not be mentioning much. And apparently this man cannot read her room to save his life, as he goes off about how this will make a great topic for his research paper. Naturally, seeing this insensitive white man belittle her father's death, Mika does not take this well, to which she snatches back the relic and storms off. Meanwhile, Ichijo and Yusuke go to the Institute for Police Science, where new anti-Grongi weapons are being developed, and we're introduced to the head researcher there, Hikari Inokita, who probably will also not mention much. The police are finally alerted to another Grongi who's been using flight to kill people from great distance. Yusuke and Ichijo manage to figure out its pattern and go after it. They find that not only is there a new wasp Grongi on the loose, but the bat is also at the scene as well. Yusuke goes to fight the wasp while Ichijo scares away the bat. Yusuke climbs up the stairs and gets to the Grongi, and we all know how this will end. Yusuke cannot fly. And big surprise, he gets pushed down the stairs again. Through the power of getting very tired of this bullshit, Yusuke unlocks yet another form, and this time, it's green. This form has enhanced senses, but Yusuke, not being used to the tide of information, gets overwhelmed and falls down the stairs anyway. Episode 8, Archer. Yusuke manages to use his enhanced senses to dodge an attack from the wasp, but it gets bored of him and flies off. Ichijo calls Sakurako to see if she can help find some way for Yusuke to get a hold of his new powers, but she says that she's been busy as Mika is still missing after her earlier outburst. Ichijo decides to track down the wasp and minimize its damage, while Yusuke tracks down Mika before she gets attacked herself. Now having the time to translate as the two boys do their work, she manages to translate a passage referring to the new green form that states, "The warrior who senses evil from great distance fires upon it with the wind's speed." She calls Ichijo to relay this information, and he puts together that Yusuke must need some kind of ranged weapon to fight in this form. Yusuke eventually managed to track Mika down to a beach because he noticed a string of seashells that she carried likely originated from this beach. The two talk for a while, and Yusuke manages to convince her to just have faith that he and Ichijo will find her father's killer and to help them as much as she can. The two's moment is interrupted as Ichijo arrives, yelling that the wasp is targeting Yusuke and is right above them. Yusuke transforms into his green form, now much easier to control being outside the city, Grongi, and Ichijo gives him his revolver. The gun transforms into a kind of bow gun. The Wasp fires a needle at Yusuke, but he dodges and catches it in midair before firing back at the Grongi, killing it with the power of friendship and this gun that he found. Episode 9, Siblings. If you're curious to why this episode is called Siblings, even though I won't be talking about the B-plot it's a reference to, watch the damn show. Yusuke has put the symbol onto a shirt now. I want it. The police joint task force is attempting to find some way to track down the Grongi to their hideout and have finally come up with a plan. They will use a good boy, I mean dog, to track their scent, where they will use a new gas grenade based off the grasshopper Grongi's aversion to smoke. Meanwhile, Yusuke pays a visit to Sakuraku, who translated yet another passage, this time describing a warrior who fights with a sword, but she's yet to finish his translation. Yusuke goes out to fight yet another Grongi, this time a squid capable of unleashing globs of explosive ink, to which Yusuke once again gets his ass kicked but is saved by the power of Deus Ex overheating as the Grongi runs back into the water. At the same time, the good boy has led the police to the Grongi's hideout successfully, and they're now preparing a full raid of the building. Episode 10, Fierceness. Ichijo joins the raid, and as it begins, the police roll 2 of the new smoke grenades under the door of the building. They appear to have little effect beyond annoying the shit out of the Grongi as they attempt to evacuate the building. The police, for some reason, wait for the gas to entirely dissipate before they enter the building, giving the Grongi ample time to escape. But the police dog seems to catch their scent and runs off after them, getting ahead of its handler where the Grongi proceed to kill the poor bupper. Yusuke asks Ichijo to spar with him in kendo, as he thinks that practicing with a sword may lead him to some revelation on how to unlock this new form. Eventually, Yusuke simply stops fighting back, and confused Ichijo stops and asks him what he's doing. Yusuke only asks him to keep hitting him and not to stop until the fight's over. Ichijo complies and continuously hits Yusuke over the head with a bamboo sword. Yusuke, however, gives no indication that he can even feel the strikes as he continues to walk slowly towards Ichijo, not even raising his weapon. Eventually, Ichijo is pinned with his back to the wall as Yusuke swiftly disarms him. Yusuke says that he thinks an unyielding spirit is exactly what he needs to get in the mindset of this new form. Shortly after, the Squid Grongi begins attacking again, and Yusuke rides out to face it, transforming into his fourth and final base form, a heavily armored purple warrior that wields a long sword. The Grongi attempts to attack Yusuke with its ink, but much like his fight with Ichijo, he gives no indication that the attacks have any effect as he slowly walks towards the Grongi before impaling it on the sword, killing it. Okay, we're getting out of the establishment phase, so let's go a little bit faster. From here on in, I'll only be giving you all the bare minimum of the story, so if you haven't watched the show, this is your chance to get out. Alright? Alright, let's get going. Yusuke develops his own iconic rider kick as we learn more about his past through discussions with his grade school teacher, Mr. Kanzaki. He continues to put the Kuuga symbol on everything he owns as he's painting it on the head of the Tri-Chaser. Jean has gone down to the ruins from the first episode to join a second excavation team and has found a large number of artifacts similar to the one Mika brought in. Yusuke goes out to fight a Grongi, but is distracted by a vision of a giant beetle-like creature and the Grongi escapes. After the fight, Jean calls Sakurako to tell her that the artifacts have pieced themselves back together in the shape of a giant beetle. Yusuke goes out to visit her soon after, and when he sees the photos of the artifact, he notices it's the same one that he saw in his vision. Jean and the excavation team decide to move the artifacts to Tokyo, and while they're in transit, Yusuke goes out to have a rematch with the Grongi. As Yusuke fights and defeats the Grongi, the artifact suddenly bursts out of the truck that was carrying it and flies off. Yusuke and Sakurako discuss the nature of these artifacts, and Sakurako shows him a partially translated passage. Yusuke jokingly reads it in a way that describes beetles as servants who transform into horse armor. Yusuke is surprisingly right on the money, as when he's called to fight another Grongi, the beetle attaches itself to the Tri-Chaser. Sadly, after the Grongi is defeated, the armor crumbles back into pieces as if losing power in some way. You cannot hide your meta-references from me! Sakurako finally translates the beetle's name as Goram, and thus we will be calling its combined form with the Tri-Chaser the Tri-Goram. Yusuke fights a mushroom man and takes a bad trip all the way to the hospital where he fucking dies. Just kidding. He's gonna be back.